minutes for discussion. I think they've raised a number of very interesting issues, um, which are not only um, new or which are not only related to the Ukraine crisis, but also issues that have been happening, over the years. And so I'll open the floor for contributions, questions, comments, and then we'll allow our panelists to respond to them. So if you have any contribution or question, you can raise your hands and then I'll come to you. So who is starting for us? Any comment, contributions, questions? Usually people don't want to be the first to ask the questions. So who is starting for us? I can see you want to say something. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Ali Ibrahim. I represent FOSDA, Foundation for Security and Development in Africa. I just have one question, and that's to Prof. So, in your presentation, getting to the tail end, you call for a collaboration. And we know how dynamic this particular war is, very dynamic across the globe, be it from the geopolitical perspective and also for conflict resolution and all other aspects. So specifically, what can we do in the interim from now going forward? Now we know the crisis, we know how it has impacted. What do we do in the interim as a collective force to ensuring that the war doesn't happen? Because one of the issues that also came up is that this is the first time that a non-alliant country has been invaded, which also opened the box for other invasions to come. What do we do to prevent that? In our African setting, we say when your neighbor's house is on fire, you have to put water closer to you so that you can also conscious when it's coming. What do we do in the interim? Thank you so much.
Did you say that NATO was invaded or?
Yes. So there's a presentation that this is the first time that Ukraine, which has given up its nuclear powers and a nuclear arsenals to just to join the non-alliance session, but a nuclear power, which is Russia, has invaded Ukraine. And then that also opens up a conversation that possibly there are other non-alliant countries that could also be invaded. It's a possibility. So I'm asking, based on the learning, based on all the issues that have come up in this regard, even though Ukraine has voluntarily given up its nuclear arsenals, but still, Russia had a case to invade Ukraine. What do we do in the interim so that such a thing doesn't also occur to other nations that voluntarily give up their powers, just to make sure that the conversation is deeper across all sessions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we'll take two more questions and then we'll come to the panelists. So any more contribution or any more questions? Yes.
My name is Martha Deriba from the Peace Council, and my question is relating to Prof. Tim's submission. He was saying the African Peace Mission is trying to mediating the conflict. So I wanted to know how far with the progress.
So the progress of the peace mission. Any more questions?
Thank you. So my name is Emmanuel from Pemplas Bites. So Prof made mention of the fact that the UN Security Council is a bit Prof Tim. Yeah, he made mention of the fact that the UN Security Council is a bit porous. Reason why we had the invasion of Ukraine. So I would want to know, how do we resolve that or transform the system? What would be some of your recommendations? Thank you.
Okay. We'll take.
Thank you. Yes, so thank you both professors for the presentations. Found them very insightful and interesting. Just as a reminder, my name is Zoe. I'm from the British High Commission here in Ghana. So a couple of questions. One is just on the work that you both do. One of the biggest sort of challenges, and I think you illustrated it really well, is getting the narrative out and explaining the history when you're sort of gathering support for initiative. And I was just interested to know what kind of work have you done together or separately to get that narrative and the message out across the continent in the way that you have today. And a separate question, I suppose, because I'm coming from a Ghana perspective, I work here with the government of Ghana and a lot of the stakeholders here in the room. And Ghana has that tradition, as you mentioned, of independence. So how have you engaged both political parties in Ghana and important stakeholders here too? Would be interested to know how you've involved Ghana in those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we'll come to our panelists, our two profs, to respond to the questions that have come so far. So maybe we'll start with Prof. Karan.
I think that we were not actually the word team.
Yes, that's what I want you to start.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I'll start with the most difficult question, what to do? What can we do right now? Well, the problem is that, if we usually, from a rational point of view, if we have some problems between us, what do? We are trying to sit down and talk. And if we can find agreement, we go to court. But the problem here in this war, by the way, it's not Ukraine crisis. It's war against Ukraine. It's Russia's war against Ukraine. It's not domestic Ukrainian crisis. The problem is that one side would like to destroy the other side, totally destroy. Again, as I have said, Putin is saying on many occasions that Ukrainians do not exist. The second, his argument, okay, we may start to talk, but on presumption that you recognize all our territorial acquisitions. So it's basically like I have problem with somebody else and I'm saying, okay, I invaded, I take half of your house, I take your wife, I deport your children, you recognize it, and then we may start to talk about what is left. That's the problem. Okay, so basically Putin right now is not ready for peace. He would like to have the war of attrition, not only, to subdue Ukraine, but also to split the West, to use these destabilizing effects for increasing influence in other parts of the world, in Africa, Middle East, Asia, Latin America, So that's the problem, we cannot just sit down to Putin and just talking. Let's do this or that. There were mentioned about many peace plans. Chinese, Turkish, what else? Brazilian, Indonesian, But I would say that, for example, if we are talking Chinese, then, it's not you know, it's basically repeats the Russian rhetoric, and Chinese plan, you know, actually doesn't demand withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine. So what should we do? And, you know, being in different universities in different countries of the world, I'm asked the question many times, what concessions Ukrainian would like to, are ready to do with Russia? What concessions? So Russia took part of our territory. What concessions are you ready, you know, to stop the war? And I'm always saying, and the polls suggested as well, that nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. Because we are killed, they're bombarded and killed every day, civilians are killed every day. But the problem is about, can we sacrifice the right of Ukrainian nation to exist and to keep its territorial integrity? Put you in our shoes. If your country is attacked, if the former colonial empire, which is Russia, is saying, you do not exist, you are part of us, give us our land, we deport your children, how would you react? Would you concede to this former colonial empire, or you will fight for independence? So I think this is the basic problem. So the problem in the interim that, let's be frank, the war, the future of the war would be solved on the front line. If Russia is not isolated economically, if we do not receive support, military support, economic support, financial support from international community, Russia will crush us, despite all the sacrifices from Ukrainian people, because Russia is large. But is this the right case for the whole world? Is it a good precedent for the whole world? No. So what I would suggest, we need to pressure Putin on different front lines, military, economic, diplomatic, and unfortunately he understands only the logic of force. This is very unfortunate. So we need to continue to fight, to have resources to fight, and that's why we need international solidarity. However, and I'm finishing here, however, there is possibility to gradually move forward. And this is what Ukrainian peace formula is about, which was discussed at Global Summit for Peace in Switzerland. So there are 10 points in Ukrainian peace formula, and they are starting from the problems which unite us: food security, energy security, exchange of prisoners, humanitarian issues. Ukrainian children are returned to Ukraine. So let's talk about it, because it's in our own interest. Food security, is it in the interest of Africa? Yes. Nuclear security, is it in the interest of Africa? Yes. Deportation of children, this is one of the points of Africa Peace Mission, which was mentioned by Africa Peace Mission. So at Global Summit for Peace in Switzerland, there was a decision, let's discuss not all 10 points of Ukrainian plan. Let's start with this least common denominator. And we had some successes, because the Peace Summit was visited by 100 countries, and 87 joined the communique, signed the communique about these 3 points. So let's try, but there are countries which didn't sign it, and some very, very important countries from so-called global south, like Brazil, like India, like Mexico, like, should I mention any countries in Africa? No, I wouldn't mention. Okay, you can check it. So again, we need to have solidarity and we need to try to solve our common problems. At the end of the day, what are Ukrainians are fighting for? Only liberation of their territory. That's all. We do not want to attack Russia. We don't need it. But in the meantime, let's start with some concrete, very, very specific actions. And maybe we will be able to increase international support regarding these issues. So I'm sorry for this long explanation, but there is, the final end of the game, which will be decided on the military front line. And there is a diplomatic pressure which may be put on the aggressor in the interests of global community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive response. So we'll take over something.
Thank you so much, Doc. To the questions that were posed, I think Emmanuel on what can we do going forward to push for the transformation of the current system. So I mentioned there's a United Nations Summit of the Future. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for the Summit of the Future in 2021. It's happening this year in September, so 2 months' time. And prior to that, he issued a high-level advisory board report called Our Common Agenda, which calls for the transformation or the reform of the UN Security Council through a charter reform process, which means we're taking the United Nations Charter and reviewing it in an extended conference. Most of you in this room do not know any other different institution apart from the United Nations. It's 80 years old. And when the UN was established in 1945, only 3 African countries were independent. Egypt, Ethiopia, Liberia. South Africa was still under the yoke of apartheid, the apartheid system. So now the UN is at 193 different countries, and it clearly is time to rethink multilateralism, to rethink what kind of institutions are going to work going forward into the 21st century. So this process is happening now. I would encourage you to engage. If you are Gen Z and you only prefer social media, go on X. It's happening there. Engage in that conversation. Put forward your ideas. But clearly, what the Russian invasion of Ukraine illustrates is there's a need to transform this system because this is going to keep happening. There will be future military interventions and an inability of the system to prevent that from happening. So we need to engage with this process. To Marta's question on the peace process, it has faltered, as you had, Marta. It's not moving forward. There's not been even a commitment to any cessation of hostilities. I mentioned less than a few weeks ago we had a children's hospital being bombed in Kiev. You heard about the Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland. Number of countries there issued a communique. So there are efforts underway. Russia did not attend that meeting, in fact, so clearly there's a challenge there. But as I said, peacemaking is 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. And you never give up on the peace process, and you can't define a peacemaking process as having failed unless you've tried everything and you've carried on. So in fact, it's ongoing. What I said is that the tracks have been laid for future interventions going forward. And so Africa should continue to be engaged, I would argue. And that leads me to Zoe's question about the challenges of getting the narrative out. I think Ukraine did not have an extensive diplomatic presence on the African continent, particularly when the conflict, the invasion happened. But since then, you've seen a concerted effort to engage African political leaders. President Zelensky spoke to the African Union. He's engaged a number of different African countries bilaterally. Also, the African population, African people, do not have enough information about the history of Ukraine, do not actually have a sense of what is this conflict all about. Very few know there was, for example, Holodomor crisis in 1930s, where more than 4 million Ukrainians were killed by the Stalin regime through starvation and other forms of, deprivation. And in that regards, Ukraine does share some of the colonial history of Africa. And it's important for you to do some of that analysis. And so, as Africans, I think, if we tap into our spirit of Ubuntu, that we are human beings to other human beings, there's no reason for us to say this is just a European war and we're not going to engage. We have many, many issues on our continent. Our plates are full. We don't want to engage. We have, as I said, a lot of experience in mediation and peace building. I mentioned WANEP. And so we do have something to offer. We do have something to put on the table. And you should feel that you can engage with this crisis. But in terms of getting the narrative out, we've done the policy briefs. Zoe, I hope you'll take all three with you back and share with your colleagues. Ukraine Society of South Africa and the Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. We undertook a similar intervention in South Africa, University of Cape Town, University of Stellenbosch, University of Pretoria. But in terms of, and tomorrow we're going to the University of Ghana. So if any of you are available to come to that event, you're more than welcome to join us there. But in terms of the political parties, we haven't laid those tracks yet. This is almost, in fact, the first initiative. We had a few colleagues from the Ghanaian government that indicated they would attend. I spoke to one or two of them personally. As you heard before, President Nana Akufo-Addo was at the Ukraine Peace Summit in Geneva, in Switzerland. And so Ghana is engaged at that high level. And so there is scope to see how we can create a foundation. Ghana was not part of the peace mission, but there's a way that maybe Ghana can also support future interventions in that regard. And so there is scope to think creatively how the African Peace Mission has laid this foundation for an off-ramp for the crisis, but also how African governments can engage going forward. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you. Okay, yes, I'm sure.
Yeah, because my colleague mentioned tomorrow's event at the University of Ghana, and there are people from Ghana University Legon here. So first of all, thank you very much for coming. And tomorrow we have event at the University of Ghana, which starts at 9:30. So maybe you can spread the word to your colleagues about it, and somebody would like to come to this event. So just share your emails with me, and I will send the program so more people would be able to come. More people, more students, maybe professors. So thank you very much. And thank you very much, Doctor, for your moderation and for WANEP support for this event. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So I wanted to go for next round of questions, but I think we don't have time. We're supposed to end at 10:40, but it's almost 10:51. I'm sure some of the issues will overlap with the other section. So if you have any questions or contribution, I think you can still bring it up during the next session so that we can end this session and allow the next session to continue. So I want to thank our panelists for the very insightful, very informative presentations. I think for most of us who don't know much about the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, I think this session has provided us with a lot of information to digest. And more importantly, the African Peace Mission. I'm sure a lot of us are also not very familiar with what has been happening since the delegation of African heads of state went to Ukraine and also Russia last year. And this session has also brought some of the progress that has been made and what can be done moving into the future to help address the situation. But more importantly, the issue of the UN reform. I think for us in Africa, we've been having this discussion since the Ezowuni consensus of having African representation also at the Security Council. And I'm happy when Prof mentioned the fact that when the UN was formed, most African states were still under colonialism. And I think that the time has come, based on what is happening across the globe, to really put a lot of attention on the reform of the UN so that we can have a better global governance system that serves the interests of everyone. So on this note, thank you to our two profs, and let's give them a round of applause for this session. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, so we will move to the next section, which is very technical. And I'm happy we have our participant from the Atomic Energy Commission here. And this section is going to look at nuclear safety and occupation of the NPP facilities. As you are already aware, I mean, the war has brought to bear the issue of nuclear safety and also the challenges that military occupation of nuclear power stations poses to the safety of the nuclear industry. And we have two distinguished researchers who are going to help us in this section. I'm told that we have one of our speakers online. And so we will start with the first speaker, Ulana Lapenko, who is a researcher at the DISY group. Let me just give a brief background of our speaker. So she is an energy security expert at the Ukraine think tank DISY group. Ulana has 15 years of practical experience in energy industry, both in the operations of electrical equipment and in commercial operations in the electricity market. She's working on issues relating to strengthening Ukraine's energy resilience and the security of energy resource supplies. And at the same time, she's an external consultant to the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine. And our second speaker is Isabel Bosman, who is a researcher at the South African Institute of International Relations, who will be joining us online. So we will start with Ulana, who will give us about 15 minutes presentation, and then we'll go to Isabel online. Thank you. Yeah.
First of all, I want to say thanks to you for coming and thanks to organizers. I want to divide my speech into two parts. First of it will be some information about the situation in Ukraine with nuclear safety. And the second part, it will be some conclusions, which all of them you can find in our policy brief. And some of them I will localize here. So energy security and nuclear safety, for my opinion, are another two front lines in this Russian-Ukrainian war. Why? Because Ukraine destroyed a lot of generation capacities in Ukraine. We have a lot of local blackouts near the front line. We have a huge deficit of electricity now in our country. We have electricity supply only for 6 or 10 hours per day, mostly at night. So it's a really hard topic for us, but it is our own problem. But the problem of nuclear safety, I'm sorry, what is this? Is a problem of the whole world. That's why we want to speak about it here and present you some information. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has posed unprecedented challenges to nuclear safety, security, and safeguard. No country that operates nuclear reactors for peaceful purposes has found itself in a situation of forceful seizure of such facilities and the constant threat of violation of nuclear safety. Before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine operated 4 nuclear power plants. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which provided electricity for up to 60% of country's needs. Additionally, we have a Chernobyl exclusion zone here. This green color marked liberated territories, the occupied territories earlier. Where in 1986 accident occurred, contaminating 145,000 square kilometers of territory, and it remains potentially hazardous area. Currently, there is centralized storage for spent nuclear fuel. The territory of the exclusion zone was occupied on the first day of the invasion, and it remained under occupation for 36 days. Throughout this period, numerous shellings and damage to power lines were recorded, leaving facilities within exclusion zone without electricity supply. After the liberation of the Chernobyl zone by Ukrainian troops, the situation with nuclear safety was brought under control. However, the greatest threat remains the occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe and housing 6 reactors. Reports from the IAEA document numerous violations of nuclear safety at the facility, including complete blackouts. They mentioned 3 of them during 2023. Representatives of the IAEA have noted inadequate technical maintenance and repairs, as well as the presence of weapons, explosives, and military equipment at the site of the station. There is a shortage of qualified personnel at the facility, and those remaining workers who are Ukrainian citizens feel unprecedented psychological pressure. And also cases of physical violence and torture were recorded there. Rafael Grossi, Director General of the IAEA, reports that the number of personnel at the station has been cut in half. Another egregious case is the destruction of the dam of Kakhovska hydroelectric power station in June 2023. This is not just a war crime. It is a direct threat to nuclear safety. The Kakhovska Dam formed reservoir for cooling needs of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Currently, the water level in this reservoir is not sufficient to start the power units of the nuclear power plant, but the water level continues to decrease. It is worth noting that all other Ukrainian nuclear power plants were also hit by Russian missiles. In September 2022, explosions also occurred near the South Ukrainian nuclear power plant, which caused the power lines connected to the plant to be disconnected. And also in November 2023, we had a first blackout in the whole country caused by the Russian massive rocket attack on the high voltage substations, which are connected with our 3 nuclear power plants that are under our control. The whole list of threatening events during full-scale invasion you can find in our policy brief, and here we present only the most harmful. Also, I want to mention the latest threatening events, which are the drone attack on Unit 6 of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which took place in April this year, and the destruction of the external radiation control station at the end of June this year. This is all about the situation in Ukraine, but now I want to transfer to another part and propose some ways to solve this problem and to establish nuclear safety rules in Ukraine's territory. What do all these events mean? Why are we trying to convey to our friends all around the world the fact that despite the existence of clear and understandable rules for the safety of nuclear installation established at the IAEA level by the resolutions of the General Conference, despite the signing the Budapest Memorandum, by which Ukraine received several key assurances from the USA, Russian Federation, Great Britain, in particular regarding territorial integrity and non-aggression, Ukraine found itself in the brink of a nuclear disaster. Ukrainian case demonstrates the lack of mechanisms to uphold security assurances provided by global nuclear powers for a state that denuclearized and joined the Non-Proliferation Treaty, thereby undermining the very concept of non-proliferation. Initial steps forward strengthening compliance with nuclear safety have been taken at the IAEA level. Since the 1st of September 2022, a permanent mission has been operational, monitoring the condition of accessible facilities. IAEA representatives are also present at all other Ukrainian nuclear power plants. They provide daily and long-term reports on the situation. Also, IAEA's Board of Governors supported resolutions on nuclear safety, security, and guarantees in Ukraine, underscoring the demand for immediately return of the power plant under the full control of Ukrainian authorities. Exactly 1 week ago, the UN General Assembly adopted the resolution demanding that Russia urgently withdraw its military and personnel from the largest nuclear power plant in Europe and immediately return the facility to Ukraine. Thanks, Ghana, for supporting this decision. However, this represents only the initial phase. Moving forward requires additional efforts to develop and agree upon practical measures that not only emphasize the necessity of meeting nuclear safety requirements, but also compel all parties to adhere to them fully. We see that more and more countries are announcing their intention to develop nuclear energy, particularly on the African continent. These are affordable and effective technologies that can boost economic growth and social well-being. But Ukrainian case should force countries to take a critical look at the ability of existing international norms to ensure nuclear safety and become a starting point for the development of clear mechanism for the protection of nuclear facilities. International agreements should clearly establish responsibility for violations of the principles of nuclear safety, as well as provide an opportunity to effectively protect reactors during military conflicts, so that they do not become a nuclear shield for an aggressor. New mechanisms and principles should make it possible to activate all tools, starting from the protection in the sky, above nuclear power plants, ending with tough sanctions against violators. The increasingly powerful voice of African countries can be one of the leaders in nuclear security issues at the level of international organizations. The African peacekeeping mission can also make a powerful contribution to achieving nuclear security by becoming a platform for initiating a human rights monitoring mission at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, an agreement to close the sky over Ukraine's nuclear facilities, and obtaining the consent of the Russian side for the IAEA mission to access all parts of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. This is only part of the important initiatives that must be implemented as soon as possible. Not only Ukraine is interested in this, but also the whole world, as radiation knows no borders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. When you spoke about the erratic power supply, it reminded me of our situation in Ghana, which we popularly call Dumso. And I mean, but more importantly, your presentation has also revealed the limitations of international norms and principles guiding the safety of nuclear power. For the sake of time, I think I'll move to the second presenter, Isabel Bosman. Is she online? Yes. So, Isabel, you have the floor. We can't hear you. Yeah. Can you hear us?
Okay, am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
Great.
So I'm not able to share my screen with you. I don't know if you could just enable the setting so I can just share my presentation.
Yes, IT, can you please do that so she can share her presentation? Yeah, but I think in the meantime you can start
Okay, let me
while the
just.
IT. Okay, I
So
think now you can share. Yes, I'm told you can share now.
quickly. No, it's all telling me that I can't. Okay, I will just speak slowly, and I'm sure you can find most of the information in the policy brief. Okay, let me just do this. There we go. So I just want to thank my co-author Elena for this first half of the presentation. You will see in the policy brief that we combine our two sections. So I will be focusing on sort of four key things. Firstly, just an issue of terminology, and then the African nuclear regulatory framework, international law and the protection of nuclear installations, and then looking briefly at the International Atomic Energy Agency's, or the IAEA's, response to the occupation of nuclear power plants in Ukraine. Two terms that I want to focus on in the terminology section is firstly nuclear safety and nuclear security. And the definitions are both drawn from the IAEA, and it defines nuclear safety, firstly, as the achievement of proper operating conditions, prevention of accidents, and mitigation of accident consequences, resulting in protection of workers, the public, and the environment from undue radiation risks. Nuclear security, then, by its definition, is the prevention and detection of and response to criminal or intentional unauthorized acts involving or directed at nuclear material, other radioactive material, associated facilities, or associated activities. And if we look at events of roughly the last 2 years, what has been happening at the Chernobyl exclusion zone, but also more importantly at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, we see how the different elements of these two definitions very much at play. Then, turning briefly to the African nuclear regulatory framework, this is where we really aim to kind of create this bridge between the contribution the African states have to the peace formula and to the broader issue of nuclear safety and security. So we see that non-proliferation, nuclear safety and security are deeply embedded in the nuclear regulatory frameworks of the African continent. African states are strong supporters of the peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology, but also recognize the significant contribution that nuclear science and technology can make to achieving development goals. The continent supports several international regulatory frameworks that relate to nuclear safety and security, non-proliferation, and disarmament. A few of the most important of these include the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the NPT, where we see that only one African state is not a member. Then the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We have 17 signatory states and 16 ratifications. We also see the support for the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the CTBT. We have one state that is not signed and one that is signed but not ratified. Then African states also show great support for the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material. And then finally, the various IAEA safeguards and other initiatives in place when it comes to nuclear safety and security. But the continent also has a robust homegrown nuclear regulatory framework and institutions that complement and, as I will show in the presentation and we try to emphasize in the policy brief, often surpass the international frameworks to which it belongs. So the key focus here is firstly on AFRA, the FNRBA, the Treaty of Pelindaba, and then AFCON. So looking firstly at AFRA, that is the African Regional Cooperation Agreement for Research, Training, and Development related to nuclear science and technology. This entered into force in 1990. Its aim is to support socio-economic development on the continent through nuclear science and technology. I highlight the AFRA mission statement here, which says that it aims to be the leading regional organization in Africa and vehicle of the member states for the effective promotion and coordination of peaceful applications of nuclear science and technology for socio-economic development on the African continent. Importantly, AFRA is specifically mentioned in Article 8, Paragraph 3 of the Treaty of Pelindaba, which says that parties are encouraged to make use of the program of assistance available in IAEA and in this connection to strengthen cooperation under the African Regional Cooperation Agreement for research, training, and development related to nuclear science and technology. Then I focus on the FNRBA, the Forum of Nuclear Regulatory Bodies in Africa. This was established in 2009 and forms part of the IAEA's Global Nuclear Security and Safety Network. It was established with the aim to enhance, strengthen, and harmonize the radiation protection, nuclear safety, and security regulatory infrastructure and framework among its members. The FNRBA has hosted several successful training workshops across the continent and is active across 6 thematic areas. These are legislative and regulatory infrastructure, radiation and waste safety, nuclear safety infrastructure, emergency preparedness and response, transport safety infrastructure, and nuclear security infrastructure. The FNRBA's 2021-2022 action plan was focused on overseeing the safety and security of radioactive material, the development of regulations for securing these sources, including a transport security exercise, FNRBA working group meetings, a regional workshop on a nuclear security culture, and a survey on the status of the radioactive material.
Hello. Hello, Isabel, we can't hear you.
Better?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, I'm just going to keep my hand here so that you can hear me. Okay. So this is the most important section that we now get to is Africa's Treaty of Pelindaba, which establishes the continent as a nuclear weapon-free zone. The Treaty of Pelindaba, or the African Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone Treaty, as it is more formally known, opened for signature in 1996, and it entered into force in 2009. And there are 2 very important articles in this treaty that are instructive, I think, for international law and when it comes to protecting nuclear installations during times of war. So firstly, Article 10 which is titled The Physical Protection of Nuclear Materials and Facilities. It reads that each party undertakes to maintain the highest standards of security and effective physical protection of nuclear materials, facilities, and equipment to prevent theft or unauthorized use and handling. To that end, each party inter alia undertakes to apply measures of physical protection equivalent to those provided for in the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material and in recommendations and guidelines developed by the IAEA for that purpose. But then Article 11 of the Pelindaba Treaty, which is really instructive and which has focuses on the prohibition of attack on nuclear installations. And it reads that each party undertakes not to take or assist or encourage any action aimed at an armed attack by conventional or other means against nuclear installations in the African nuclear weapon-free zone. We see that there is no multilateral treaty to govern the protection of nuclear installations against armed attack, quite like Pelindaba does. That is mostly governed, as we'll see, by customary international law rather than treaty law. So what we do have in place, however, in the international law framework is the two additional protocols to the Geneva Conventions of 1949, and then importantly, the rules of international humanitarian law. And precisely because there is no international treaty law per se on this, customary law carries a little bit more weight. I do comment on that in another paper that I wrote on legal protection for the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which you can access on the website of the South African Institute of International Affairs. But I want to draw your attention to rule number 42, the rules of international humanitarian law, and it reads as follows. Particular care must be taken if works and installations containing dangerous forces, namely dams, dikes, and nuclear electrical generating stations, and other installations located at or in their vicinity are attacked in order to avoid the release of dangerous forces and consequent severe losses among the civilian population. I just want to check, am I still audible? Festus, can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can
Okay,
hear
thanks.
you, yeah.
Thank you. And then to complement Rule 42 of the Rules of International Humanitarian Law is Article 15 of Additional Protocol 2 to the Geneva.
Now we can
Oh,
hear you well. Yeah.
okay, let me. Is that a bit better? Almost done.
Yes.
Okay, let's do it this way. So then to complement Rule 42 of the Rules of International Humanitarian Law are Articles 15 of Additional Protocol 2 to the Geneva Conventions and Article 56.1 of Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions. These read the same, and it's as follows. Works or installations containing dangerous forces, namely dams, dikes, and nuclear electrical generating stations, shall not be made the object of attack, even where these objects are.
We can hear you now. Hello. Now we can't hear you. It's not clear. Yeah, we still can't hear you. Hello. Yeah, but it's a bit low. If you can check the volume, your audio. Is it from our end or from her end? We unfortunately we can't hear you. I don't know if you are almost done.
Yes, I am almost done. I've got one more slide.
No. Is it can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah, but we cannot hear you well.
Okay. Well, I don't know what else to do.
Now is better. Now is better. So you can conclude.
Okay. Let me quickly finish.
Yeah. So you can conclude.
Then just focusing on the last section, and this relates to how the International Atomic Energy Agency has responded to the occupation of nuclear power plants in Ukraine. We see that there have been several statements, emergency meetings, reports on the situation on the ground, both in Chernobyl and Zaporizhia. We see several safety and security inspections, and we also note there that the Director General of the IAEA has himself been involved in those inspections. IAEA experts were permanently stationed at Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, as well as other nuclear facilities in Ukraine in a monitoring role. The IAEA has provided technical support and assistance, as well as the delivery of critical equipment. And the Director General has also delivered several briefings to the UN Security Council calling for an end to shelling near the plant, as well as calls for the creation of a nuclear safety and security protection zone around Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. But this has not yet been realized. And then this led us to ask what more can be done. I want to highlight two elements here. And this is firstly that we believe that there should be greater follow through and political will to do what is necessary. And here we see that in many instances in the past, the situation that we are experiencing now, where an operational nuclear power facility is under threat from military attack, has been presented as a possibility for the future, but that very little was done in terms of putting in firmer legal mechanisms to protect it. So I want to highlight here, as an example, Resolution 533 of the IAEA's General Conference from October 1990. This states briefly that the General Conference, aware of the fact that an armed attack on a nuclear installation could result in radioactive releases with grave consequences within and beyond the boundaries of the state which has been attacked, convinced of the need to prohibit armed attacks on nuclear installations from which such releases could occur, and of the urgency of concluding an international agreement in this regard, and aware of the ongoing work of the Conference on Disarmament with a view to concluding an international agreement in this regard, one recognizes that attacks or threats of attack on nuclear facilities devoted to peaceful purposes could jeopardize the development of nuclear energy. Two, considers that the safeguard system of the agency is a reliable means of verifying the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. And then to highlight their point number 7, where it urges all states to cooperate in achieving a successful resolution of the issue in the near future. So there we see how important follow through and political will is in terms of protecting these installations. And then the second and final element that I wanted to highlight here in terms of what more can be done is that we also need to recognize the limitations of the legal frameworks that we have in place. International law and much of treaty law only really works if states abide by them and if states protect them. And while we do acknowledge that the Treaty of Pelindaba is very instructive and exemplary in its inclusion of a specific clause prohibiting armed attack against nuclear installations, we do not know how an enforcement mechanism would be applied should a state violate that, because it has not yet happened. And with that, I'm going to end my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. Although at some point we're not hearing you clearly. I think your concluding remarks has brought us some of the issues we need to revisit when it comes to the international legal regime governing the protection of nuclear power plants in times of war. Our time is our time is up, but I think I'm going to give the floor for some questions, contributions to maybe four participants, and then we can break for coffee. So if you have any question, please, you can raise your hands and I'll give you the microphone. You want to stand.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for all the presentations, including the ones I missed part of earlier in the morning. My name is Martin Eglobe, and I'm from the Department of Physics in the University of Ghana. I have a number of observations and a question. I may have missed it, but I wanted to find out if the ZNPP is currently in shutdown or no. And I don't know if Molina could answer that one. Whether the power plant is in shutdown, the Zaporizhzhia power plant is in shutdown currently or no. But then something also came up in the statement or the presentation by Isabel, and that had to do with the fact that there are limitations to international legal treaties. And in fact, my observation is that these treaties and international law and order essentially is enforced by the powerful countries. So it's actually something that is guaranteed by the big countries. And so if the United Nations seems to be in trouble, I don't know where really the enforcement of the international order is going to come from. And for me, it suggests that there is much larger trouble on the horizon than meets the eye right now. And then I think I just have one also question. If you don't mind, it will have to bring in Professor Haran. Well, he's not here to answer, so I guess I could I could leave the comments now. Thank you.
Yes.
Right. Essentially, yeah, it had to do with a comment he made, which was that he felt that the conflict currently will be decided on the military front. And I just wanted to uh, ask whether he wasn't considering that this could very easily escalate into a nuclear exchange between the nuclear armed powers, which we don't have any precedent, but it doesn't seem like once it starts to end. So that was my question for Professor Alexei. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think when he comes in, we'll prompt him about your question so he can respond appropriately. Yeah, you can pass the microphone.
Thank you. My name is Eric Glover from Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. The question to Olena. You said that, I think about a few months ago, the external monitoring system at the Zaporizhzhia is up. So how are you monitoring radiation exposures to be able to detect whether something is going wrong within?
Okay.
If I may follow up, I also have some issues with this. Yes, it is there. It is supposed to have a regulatory framework for most African countries. Most works have been done, but these laws and things have not been passed because of that commitment from the member states. So I think, I don't know how we should look at which forum to be able to address this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so go to Professor Alidu.
Thank you so much. Good morning to you all. My name is Seydou Alidu, Department of Political Science, University of Ghana. So clearly, aspects of this war violates international human rights law. especially with regards to the safety of our nuclear plants in Ukraine. And we know, like my senior colleague mentioned, that international laws are usually enforced by the very powerful countries. And Russia is a very powerful country with a veto power in the UN Security Council. What other options are available for the international community to make sure that the right thing is done before we face another nuclear disaster?
Thank you. The last question, and then we'll come to our panelists.
Thank you very much. I'm Kagao from the Center for Migration Studies. So, from the submission, we can tell that the Ukraine conflict has basically exposed the vulnerabilities in our global nuclear safety protocols, right? So, my question is, considering the potential for nuclear incidents and deliberate misuse, how do we weigh the benefits of nuclear energy against its risk of geopolitically unstable regions like Russia and whatnot?
Do you understand?
Should I take the question again?
So maybe you can elaborate more so that she'll be able to respond.
Okay, so from your submission, I understood that the conflict has exposed various vulnerabilities in our global nuclear safety protocols. So what I'm asking is that considering the potential for nuclear incidents or deliberate misuse, right? How are we going to weigh the benefits of nuclear energy against its risk of misuse in other regions? Yeah. So should we still have other countries chasing or wanting to have nuclear weapons or whatnot? Should they establish it? Should they? What are the benefits? How do we weigh them, the risk and all of that? Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much. I think we have questions for our panelists. And then Prof, you also have a question. So when they are done, I'll pose your question to you. So we'll start with Oleana.
Yes. Thank you. I will start from the first question from Martin. Here it's about the state of reactors in Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. They are shut down now in a cool state, but every, I think, week or every month we read or hear that Russian declare their intentions to put into these reactors into operate. Yes, we understand now that it will be a long process because there is a lack of this level of water in the cooling reservoir, and also they have a problem with this active zone of reactors because 4 of these reactors have Westinghouse fuel assemblers, and also they have this American produced automatic control system, which Russian don't know how to work with. And it will we hope that it's only Russian declarations. It's not about their real plans. The second question was about the destruction of the external radiation control system, not system, but station. We still have information from there, and other points. I know that all the some of stations are under operation now. So yes, we know that there is a lack of information from all the points, but still IAEA can control maybe all the parts around the nuclear power plant. And the third question was the waste, something waste against powerful country when they attack nuclear power plant. I think that this is the question to our previous speakers, how to unite all the countries which are can help here, so they can we can make rules and we can make tools and instruments to punish violators of international law. So we don't have like a plan, but we have some proposals for you, for international community. Some approaches which can help, starting from the military peaceful mission to Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and closing the sky under it, and finishing with the platform to communicate these problems between all the parts that involved in this conflict. And the last question, Ukraine now faced with such question because we are about to start to finish construction of two nuclear units on our Khmelnytskaya nuclear power plant. So it's under discussion. There are a lot of discussions now because it is war in Ukraine now. But we want to start to restart the construction. So I think that I have anti-nuclear position. So it's a really hard question. I know that this green transition movement and take into account nuclear energy here, it is a part of it. So these technologies of small modular reactors, it's our perspective. So without the strong international legislation with responsibility for violators, I think we have no right to develop such kind of technologies. And Ukrainian case is the point, is the platform to discuss it now and then develop such kind of technologies.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll go to Isabel.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I think Olena has given very thorough answers there, so I'll just chime in with a few additional comments. Thank you to all the participants for those comments, and thank you also for accommodating me virtually today. Apologies for the technical difficulties. But just in terms of the issue of where would enforcement come from, how would we enforce these rules better? I think as Olena said, there may not be a concrete plan, but there are several proposals, and I think that one of the kind of messages that the current situation at ZNPP, but also what's happening in conflicts around the globe more broadly is telling us is that the world's at a time where the international regulatory system, international laws, the multilateral system needs to undergo significant self-reflection and review to see where it is at, what are its shortcomings, identify those, and come up with proposals on how it will make it better. These treaties and legal mechanisms are only really as strong as how our states respect them, and I think that's part of the problem. When one state sees another one disregarding certain rules, it's a slippery slope, and it's easy to go down it. So I think the world is at a critical moment where it needs to review the institutions it created. The UN, as I think is really central in this discussion. How effective is its enforcement mechanisms? As some of the participants have highlighted, if certain states have veto power, it kind of makes you question, the point of some of these legal mechanisms if they can just be disregarded in that way. And then I think so what we really try to do by looking at the FNRBA, AFRA, AFCON, that is just really to say that that all forms part of the larger mission of the Treaty of Pelindaba, which is really our main focus here, which establishes Africa as a nuclear weapon-free zone, and to show that the power of this treaty lies in this big network. But certainly, as the participant highlighted, it depends on the commitment from states. So it ties into this kind of the same problem that we experience when international law is being violated and disregarded. And we need to work on the respect that states have for those mechanisms. And then there was a question about weighing the benefits of nuclear energy against the risks. And if I recall correctly, the participant also mentioned states, chasing nuclear proliferation and looking for and asking whether more nuclear weapons is necessary. And no, more nuclear weapons is not the answer. And I also want to highlight there that nuclear energy itself is not inherently dangerous. It is how it is managed. It is how we respect it. It is how it's protected. And the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, especially, I mean, we see it in basic things like an X-ray. When you need an operation, those are incredible benefits that we cannot do without. So more needs to be done to promote the peaceful uses, to protect the peaceful uses, I would say. And I think that's all that I have written down here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for the responses. I think there was a question for Prof. Haran, which is, I don't know whether you've been briefed already. Do you want me to repeat? Yeah. So the question was, you made a point that the war can only be decided on the military front. Okay, but the question was about whether that was not going to escalate the situation into a nuclear confrontation between Russia and the major powers, or NATO or other powers in Ukraine.
Well, look, in order to reach peace, we need to have the will to reach peace. Mr. Putin doesn't belong to those whom we can ask, please, Mr. Putin, leave Ukraine, stop bombardments of Ukraine, leave nuclear power station. He will not do that. Very simple. He will do that only if he is pressed at the different fronts, military, economic, diplomatic, and so on. Now, because actually we do not ask, for NATO country to intervene. We are not asking to send soldiers. We are dying ourselves. But Ukrainians need weapons to defend themselves, and Ukrainians need weapons to close our skies. So to make our civilians and children safe against Russian bombardments. As simple as that. We are not asking again NATO to send soldiers to Ukraine. Give us weapons. Other countries may give us weapons as well. There is Soviet-type weapons in Africa. So you may also, some African countries are actually resending it back to Ukraine. For example, it was the case of Morocco. Just an example, okay? So it's not about NATO. Now, who is talking about nuclear escalation and the use of nuclear weapons? Who is talking about that? Russia. Okay? So this is the aim. This is called nuclear blackmail. They cannot beat Ukraine in conventional war, despite the fact that Russia is much larger. But they cannot do that. So, and that's why they're talking about use of nuclear weapons. So I think what is important for all the countries to pressure Putin, stop talking about the use of nuclear weapons. India did it way, and even China did it, by the way. So the whole world should prevent the use of nuclear weapons. The nuclear escalation is not, part of the Western strategy. Not at all. They are very, very careful, actually, even about supplying the weapons, defense weapons to Ukraine. This is part of the Russian strategy, to blackmail the whole world. And I will give you example of the pressure on Putin in this sphere, diplomatic example. I don't know, Elena, if you, because I was giving interviews, so if you talked about it, about the United Nations resolution, which demanded, you talked about that, right? Which demanded withdrawal of Russian troops from nuclear power station. Have you provided figures? No, okay. So 99 countries voted in favor of this resolution. So 99 countries, including Ghana, by the way. So thanks again to Ghana for Mr. Putin to leave nuclear power station. Only 9 countries voted against this resolution. Good result. Good. But 60 countries abstained. That's what I can't understand. Guys, it's about nuclear security for the whole world, not only for Ukraine. Very, very simple. Never ever in history, foreign military occupied nuclear power station. So I think that, again, we are thankful for all those who supported Ukraine. The result is overwhelmingly in favor of demand for Russian troops to leave Ukraine. 60 countries say we do not care. And that's what I, frankly speaking, don't understand. That's what I mean by diplomatic pressure as well. There are different tools. We may show solidarity, in different spheres. Also humanitarian assistance to, every third Ukrainian had to leave the home. Every third, which is 14 million Ukrainians. So we need a lot of resources, if not military, economic, humanitarian, diplomatic, moral support. Everything is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think our panelists deserve a round of applause. Can we move it to them? Yes. I thought the session was going to be very, very technical, but I think our panelists have been able to explain the issues more clearly and simple for us to understand. But I think the whole discussion goes back to the reform of the multilateral system and also the UN Security, Council. The issues around the challenges with the current legal regime governing the nuclear power states and the enforcement of some of the provisions in the international law has been discussed, but also more importantly, not only about having the laws, but also how to enforce the laws. And when you still have these powerful states still having those veto powers within the Security Council, it makes it very difficult to even enforce any law that you make or any revisions that you make, and which underscores the importance of looking at the current multilateral system and making it better to serve all countries so we don't go back to the period of the League of Nations, which collapsed because of some of the issues happening. So on this note, I think we've been sitting for a while. We want to break for about 10 minutes for coffee, and then we'll come back for the last session. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your participation. So 10 minutes, and then we come back. Thank you. So we have coffee outside. You can grab something and then you come back.
Our moderator can demonstrate is a great moderator. Yeah, now you know.
Okay, so welcome back from coffee. We'll move to the last panel or last session on the agenda, which is focusing on the issue of forceful deportation of children. The war between Russia and Ukraine has highlighted some of the issues of human rights against children in armed conflicts, especially issues of deportation, unlawful transfers, and also issues of adoption. So this panel is going to help us discuss some of the issues from the African perspective and also from the perspective of somebody who is residing in Ukraine. And we have two distinguished experts who will help us in this section. So the first person who will be presenting is Katrina Rashevska. I got it right. She is a legal expert at the Regional Center for Human Rights and a PhD fellow at Taras Shevchenko National University. She authored the submission of the Regional Center for Human Rights and the Lachman Institute of Genocide Prevention to the International Criminal Court on crimes committed against Ukrainian children. She has also contributed to the draft UN General Assembly resolution on the repatriation of illegally deported children. So she will present to us looking at Ukraine. And then a second presenter, Dr. Elvis Fukala. He is a project manager of child law, family law, and public international law at the Center for Human Rights, Faculty of Law, University of Pretoria. He holds a PhD in public international law with a specialization in child law. And he also has an LLM in multidisciplinary human rights law from the Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria, South Africa, and an LLB from the University of Boué in Cameroon. He has specialized knowledge in child law, family law, and the law of persons. So you could see that from their backgrounds, they are the right people to speak to the issue. So I will turn to Katerina to start the first presentation.
Thank you so much. Distinguished audience, I am very grateful to you for coming and for your interest to Ukraine and to Ukrainian deported children. My name is Katerina Rashevska, and I am a legal expert at the Regional Center for Human Rights. The focus of my work is the fight, a real fight against forcible deportation, forcible transfer, also adoption of Ukrainian children, as well as militarized re-education of Ukrainian children by the Russian Federation and Belarus. Together with my colleagues from the Regional Center for Human Rights and other non-governmental organizations who are directly involved in the process of repatriation of Ukrainian children, we have submitted 3 communications to the International Criminal Court. But we were also trying to attract attention by the side of the United Nations competent body. We submitted one side report to the United Nations CRC, Committee on the Rights of the Child, and also to the United Nations Committee on the Liquidation of Racial Discrimination. Because unfortunately, all these actions, they have elements of the crime of genocide, and this committee is able to prevent the genocide coming. Every 5th child in the world suffers in armed conflicts, and unfortunately, every Ukrainian child. Ukrainian children are killed, injured, raped. They are forced to witness or even are subjected to terrifying acts of violence. Unfortunately, Russia targets Ukrainian children deliberately. They are not the so-called collateral damage. On July 8th, the Russian Federation deliberately attacked the largest children's hospital in Ukraine, Okhmedit. This attack resulted in deaths, injuries, and a significant deterioration in the health of children who were battling cancer and other illnesses. Rebuilding this hospital will cost billions of dollars and time. They are both critical for Ukrainian children. Time is always placed against Ukrainian children. But also, since the beginning of the occupation of the Crimean Peninsula, so since 2014, the Russian Federation is deporting Ukrainian children or forcibly transferring them. As for today, we have identified at least 20,000 Ukrainian children who were deported to 57 regions of the Russian Federation as well as to Belarus. Sometimes Ukrainian children are taken 6,000 kilometers away from their place of birth without any possibility to be returned if their legal representative will not go to Russia, will not claim them, will not pass all procedures just in order to bring their blood children back. Among these children were orphans, like these 2 boy and girl, Margarita and Ilya. They were forcibly transferred from Kherson Regional Children's Home at the age of 1 and 2 years old. One of these children, Margarita, was then forcibly transferred to the family of the Russian high-ranking official Sergei Mironov. And the fate of Ilya is unknown. We just don't understand where is this boy. Among these children, there are also those who were separated during the filtration process with their family members, like Matvey, Sveta, and Sasha. Their father was deliberately detained for several months, but these children were prepared to be adopted by Russian foster parents
without any consent by the side of his and her father. Thanks for God and thanks for the fact that this father, Yevgeny, was liberated. He was able to stop the process of adoption and return his children back to Ukraine. Among deported children, there are also those whose parents were killed in shellings or in attacks, like Anastasia and Sonia. These two girls were prepared to be adopted, but separately. So Russians planned to separate two blood sisters and to send them to two different Russian families. Thanks for the courage of their blood sister, so this process was also stopped and children were returned to Dnipro in Ukraine. Among deported children, there are also those who were just abducted by Russian soldiers from streets, like Sergei. In this screen, you can see two girls, Katya and Ira. They were deported and unlawfully adopted in 2014 in the margin of the Russian specific program for adoption of Ukrainian children, Train of Hope. So in this screen, you can see photos then in 2014 and now in 2024. These two girls just don't understand and don't know the truth about their national identity and are raised like Russian patriots. I would like to highlight here that Russian deportation is not an evacuation because it violates several rules of the international humanitarian law as well as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So it doesn't have temporary character. The Russian Federation didn't even try to receive some consent by the side of legal representatives of Ukrainian children or by the side of Ukraine. And they just limited access of all international independent organizations to the process of this so-called evacuation. And also they didn't provide any information about Ukrainian children, for example, to the ICRC in order to facilitate the process of family reunification. Moreover, the Russian Federation has intent to keep these children under their control forever. On this screen, you can see the decree of the President Putin dated on January 4 this year. Previously, he issued other decrees related to the facilitated procedure of the forcible imposition of the Russian citizenship on Ukrainian children. What does it mean? Ukrainian children receive not only some rights, but also obligations, namely the obligation to serve into the Russian army after the age of 18. We had several cases where Ukrainian boys sent to the Russian Federation at the age of 16, 17, started receiving the summons to Russian army. So after the age of 18, if we would not be able to return them, they would be mobilized. Also, this decree facilitated the process of unlawful adoption of Ukrainian children. On this screen, you can see several foster families. We have identified 83 Russians who unlawfully fostered or adopted Ukrainian children. Really, we should distinguish these two processes, but the result is the same. Ukrainian children are Russified, their national identity is eradicated, they are re-educated and brainwashed by these proper families. And the worst thing is that mostly these Russian parents, they are really ordinary people. So teachers, educators, but who are clear links with the Russian Putin regime. That is why, because of the fact that Russian so-called evacuation is not like according to some rules of the international humanitarian law, and has clear elements of the crime of deportation. In March 2023, the International Criminal Court issued 2 arrest warrants against Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Commissioner for Children's Rights, Lvova Belova. And also other national competent bodies opened more than approximately 4,000 criminal proceedings related to crimes committed by Russians against Ukrainian children. So we are trying to bring perpetrators to justice, but I'm not sure that anyone else national system in the world would be able to deal with such a scale of atrocities. Repatriation of Ukrainian children takes approximately 1 month and costs approximately 3,000 euros for one child. So of course, during the armed conflict, it is too difficult to bring these children back without some assistance. That is why Ukrainian non-governmental organizations, together with competent bodies, are trying to cooperate, to coordinate their efforts to bring as much children as possible. But unfortunately, as for today, 19% of all children deported after the beginning of the large-scale invasion are still in Russia. Actually, only 388 children were repatriated. With this dynamic, we need another 90 years in order to bring back home only those children who have been already identified. Here, I would like to highlight that the life in occupied territories of Ukraine continues. That is why other children become deprived of parental care or orphans, and Russia continues their deportation to Russia and their transfer to Russian families. In this on this map, you can see that sometimes the distance between the place of birth and the place of deportation is like 70 kilometers. But in order to get home, these parents, together with their children, should go through several countries of Europe, and it is approximately 3,000 kilometers of the way. So it is too long, and all this provoked by the refusal of the Russian Federation and Russian high-ranking officials to cooperate effectively and to like withdraw all obstacles on the process of repatriation. Here, I would like to tell that this unreasonable delay in repatriation of Ukrainian children is a separate war crime. You can see on the screen some challenges already described by me, and also very mediatized process of so-called reunification of families through mediation of Qatar. I am sure that at least some of you are aware that during 1 year, Qatar is a mediator in the process of reunification of Ukrainian and Russian families. But I would like to highlight here that mostly we are not talking about deported children. We are talking about children who were separated because of the Russian aggression. And that is why Russia is willing to cooperate and to demonstrate that deportation was not existed. This is not true. These are separate cases, separate situation. And in general, as I have already told, deported children remain under Russian control. Here, the problem is that legal representatives should be physically in occupied territories or in Russia during the process of repatriation of a child. For some categories of children, you saw them, it is just impossible. They are orphans. They don't have any parents to go to Russia. But they are Ukrainian children. Ukraine claims them. We have in Ukraine families, foster families, who are ready to adopt them and to foster them as Ukrainians according to their best interest and according to the right to identity. Finally, how can states of Africa help? So we are here because we believe that together, joining our efforts, we can make our world more safe, more fair for all children, not only for Ukrainian. In order to do it, we should start from cooperation in some concrete spheres. The states of Africa can join the international coalition on repatriation of Ukrainian children. This is really humanitarian initiative. There is nothing about bringing perpetrators to justice. This is some compromise in order to return children as soon as possible. We would like also to have some field in order to exchange our experience and in order to learn from you, because African states are excellent in rehabilitation and reintegration of children affected by international crimes. We are ready to listen to. We would like also that African states support the adoption of a possible resolution of the United Nations General Assembly on repatriation of Ukrainian children, and also another resolution on recognizing political indoctrination and eradication of national identity as the seventh grave violation committed against children during war. In order to demonstrate why this recognition is so important, I would like to show you this screen. Here is Russian camp. They pretend that this is a camp to rehabilitate children. This is a camp for their rest. Ukrainian children are detained in such camps during the season of summer and autumn and spring. This is Avangard camp in Volgograd region. Here, Ukrainian children are educated to use weapons, drones, to use parachutes. They are also trained under control of people who participated in the so-called special military operation, so aggression against their proper country. In some official websites of the Russian local ministries of education, it is indicated that the main goal of this camp is to raise new Russian patriots and to prepare them to serve in the Russian army. So we should stop this practice, because all international community needs children for prosperity, but Russians need new soldiers for a new war. And just to finish my presentation, I would like to tell that Ukrainian children, of course, need psychological rehabilitation, medical services, they need justice, they need compensation, but more than anything else, Ukrainian children need peace. That is why I call on you to help us to bring Ukrainian children back to their homes, because under the Russian control, it would be impossible to guarantee to them all their basic human rights. Thank you.
Let's continue. Thank you. Now, just want to amplify that conversation by drawing it closer to home. And this is home for us, most of us who are here. But I will start with a very simple opening that my brother at the back there said, that he said, when there's fire in your neighbor's house, that you should have a bucket of water next to you. Is that right? You said that. But I'll tell you one thing. Don't just have that bucket of water, that you use it as well to extinguish the fire. Because the way our houses are built in this continent, they are so within close proximities. So if that fire escalates, it will meet your house. But the best way of preventing that fire is to extinguish that fire. So join that neighbor with that bucket of water to extinguish the fire. Now, Ghana sits in a very special situation where your neighbors, you don't have fire, but your neighbors have fire. Togo, Burkina Faso, you can name them, Nigeria. You can name these countries, they do have fire. And Ghana is very peaceful, quotes open and close, and also extremely lethargic in the way that it attacks or gets into AU forces to extinguish fires in other homes. There are some Ghanaian soldiers in the AU forces, I know that. The point that I'm drawing to is the fact that we sit in a very peaceful, quote unquote, open close country to talk about children. But if I reduce the conversation from abduction to kidnapping, you will understand that conversation. because we've not had it enough in Ghana. But we also sit in a situation where if we cross the borders to Togo, or we go to Burkina Faso, or go to Boko Haram regions in northern Nigeria, it will be a completely different story because there will be issues of experience, issues of first-hand experience that the people have faced. Now, children are caught in these situations across the world and including in Ukraine, whereas they are not involved in conversations that start wars. Children are not involved in fighting these wars. But if we get to Liberia, then we can understand how you get child soldiers and in different countries. I started this in this way because I wanted us to relate with the realities that we have around us. The DRC will tell you the same. Liberia will tell you the same. Sudan, right now, as we speak, will tell you the same. I have 2 students who cannot go back to their country because they've been completely, put out of their country for what is going on in Sudan. South Sudan would tell you the same. They seem to be peaceful, but they are not. And with all these and all these things that happened, these kids or children were not part of the discussions that broke out into wars, 2, in the fighting that is taking place. So they are collateral damages. They are consequential damages to just these effects. And that also spills out into the case of Ukraine. At the level of institutions, and one of the plea that the earlier panel made very strongly is the issue of reform. I'll tell you that speaks more to children than any other person. And the reason why it speaks more to children than any other person is because with most of us adults, and especially in our cultures, we believe that we have a supreme mandate to speak for children and to decide for children. But that is not what international law, requires when it gives the right to a child. Article 12 of the UNCRC says every child has the right to be heard. If you look at the African Children's Charter, 4 sub 2 and 7 also says every child has the right to be heard. In political language, you say freedom of expression. But these kids and those who are continuously removed from their countries, they are not given that opportunity to express that. The international community has a very, very, very slow approach to deal with children's issues. We have never seen any country that has taken another country to an international forum because of the children who are being abused. South Africa has done it with against. Look at my brain now. Went to the ICJ very recently. Elvis, wake up! Now you know. Against that country, I can't remember the name, but I was recently in Beirut last week in Lebanon, where I was teaching in one of their universities, and in that university, St. Joseph University, 40 kilometers away from that university, Israel is busy bombing that country because they want to extend what is happening in Palestine into Lebanon. And from there, we have institutions or issues that are affecting that country at the same time. So the issue of conflict is a global thing. It's something that affects most of us, countries in the global south, and those countries in Europe that do not have enough superpower as Russia does. So what are the solutions? Where do we go? The first thing that I would like us to do as civil society, and maybe to amplify the call that Katerina has mentioned earlier, that when we speak to our governments, we think about issues strongly about reform. And one of them is around the issues or around the ICJ as well. The ICJ, the African Children's Committee, even though it has the name children, the United Nations Children's Committee as well, and were not, or maybe these two were made for children, but the ICJ was not made for children. So issues of escalating and bringing binding decisions that speak to that level do not apply in that space. The Committee on the Rights of the Child, the UN committee only makes recommendations. So the state can decide not to take the recommendation or to take the recommendation. But how do we move these conversations to a point where a country like Ghana, could decide and say, you know what, we need these complaints to be amplified and be binding so that if it fails to be implemented, a state can be held against or failing to comply with international law. Is that we need to seriously, and it's one of our reasons or recommendations, we need to seriously and intentionally think about recommending as Africa to the United Nations about the creation of an institution that will legislate or maybe pass out binding decisions on issues that affect children. We do have one in Africa, the APCAAC. Now, the APCAAC, which is the African Platform for Children on Children in Armed Conflicts, the APEACC, one of my disappointing points about it is that it is also reactionary. Now, what that platform has done in many instances is that it has issued statements against countries where children have been abducted, and has requested for those children to return back to their countries of origin. The latest one is when it issues a statement against Boko Haram to return the children back to the northern part of Nigeria in the Kaduna region. So that happened. And currently, the children came back with so many things. What we know from this experience is that these children were adopted. They are now brainwashed in different parts of the world where they are, including Ukraine. What we do not know is that some of them are being used, one, for child labor, two, forced marriage. Some come back maybe pregnant, and some come back after learning one or two things in the homes where they have been abused. Child labor is prohibited rather under international children's rights. Issues around child marriage is also strongly prohibited, including by children's institutions and beyond that. So for us, going back to the bucket water theory, is that when we live in our homes, today we will live from here and we'll have food outside. We'll live from here, we go to our houses, hug our own children. But we have families in the countries that I've mentioned that do not have the possibility of seeing their own children until we amplify what we are doing right now for these children to return. Use that bucket of water. Let's all unite on this issue by one, recognizing the fact that anything that happens to any child across the world will affect us as well in one way or the other. And the fact that if it is only children in Ukraine, these are children. It is the only human group with a time clock, 18 years. If you go below 18, above 18, you are no longer a child. So these children's childhood is largely being, stolen. So if we have that opportunity now where we are right here to join our fellows, brothers and sisters from Ukraine to support this mission, then we must have this conversation, one, at the African level, two, at the global level, so that we see to it that irrespective of what is happening in a particular country, that the impact of that also affects every other child in different places of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very insightful presentations by Katrina and then Dr. Elvis. I think that their presentation has brought to fore some of the issues that normally you don't hear much in the conversation around the conflict in the war in Ukraine and also issues in Africa. But especially when Elvis, he's not a typical African academic, says I should call him Elvis. Yeah. So when you mentioned the issue of kidnapping and some of the issues happening around our region, I mean, it's resonated well, I mean, with that in terms of what is also happening, although ours is happening from a different, perspectives, where children are even being used as suicide bombers by Boko Haram and others. And I'm sure people have a lot of questions or contributions that they want to make. And so I'll open the floor for any questions or any contributions or additions to the presentations. So you can please raise your hands and I will call you. Yes. Where is the other microphone? There was a microphone somewhere. Yes. Please pass it to the back.
All right. My name is Albert Whaley from the University of Media Arts and Communication, IJ. This is my question. We've continuously heard Ukraine's side of the story, Zelensky's side of the story, America's side of the story. And now, in as much as we do not like wars, we do not like bombing of schools, hospitals, and etc., we also don't like one-sided narratives or single stories, if I may call it like that. Now, before the war, we've heard of NATO provocations, continuous provocations by NATO forces, and complete disregard for Russian sovereignty. Now, my question is, well, you may call it maybe Russian propaganda, but my question is this the case? And if it is, how moving forward are we going to be able to avoid such a situation like provocations? I don't know if my question is clear. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think we'll come to the responses for this question. Can we take another? Yes, if you want to ask a question, please go ahead.
My name is Anthony. I'm from the University of Ghana Political Science Department. So I want to say something. And I want to say that the question here is, what is Africa's role in the international community? For example, Africa is disregarded when it comes to the international community. You see, for example, the South Africa-Israel case, where there is no definitive ruling, if you know, on that case. And we know Israel is committing a genocide right now in Palestine, but there is no definite ruling on this case. So if Africans are being told that we should voice out, we don't commend the kidnapping of children and all that, we condemn it. But if we voice out, are you sure they are really going to take it? Are they really going to take our position? That is the main question. And then one other thing is from the analogy by Dr. Elvis, he talked about the fire at home and things. So I also think that some way, somehow, some African states are engaging in isolationism because they have cases, they have issues at home. So you can talk about, for example, you can say there's a saying that you should first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly the speck out of your neighbor's eye. So I think some states are engaging in that because they want to solve their issues at home first before they can focus at issues abroad. So that is one thing that I want to say.
Okay. Thank you. I think we'll pick a few more. Yes. Can you please pass the microphone to her? Here.
Thank you. I'm Kagao from CMS. So in Katharina's submission, she mentioned some psychological and cultural long-term issues, children losing their sense of identity and whatnot. And you also mentioned that some children have been returned successfully. So what have you put in place, or how have you been able to help them with their psychological issues and what they lost? Like, how has it been? Yeah, I don't know whether it's clear.
You mean psychosocial support to those
Thank
children?
you.
Okay, so she will respond.
Hello, please.
Please. Yeah, so let's respond to this round and then we'll come for another
No,
round.
I want to respond to some of the questions that has been asked.
Oh, okay.
What can Africa do? They are not asking us to send our military to their country to fight on their behalf. But just as the first speaker said, we have voices in the sense of votes at the UN. Even if the ordinary Ghanaian hasn't heard anything at all, we have heard of how the Russian-Ukraine war impacted us. During about 2 years ago, how the cost of bread and other things, yes, even onion, it affected us. So if you think it does not concern you, be there. Every little thing that goes on in this world affects everybody, regardless whether you live geographically in that location or elsewhere. So if it affects Ukraine and it affects the cost of wheat in Ghana, don't say it doesn't concern us. What I'm even more concerned about is the children who are now orphans. I read from the screen a man who was able to track his own children in Russia and brought them back. But those that parents have been killed in the invasion, how are those children going to be tracked? If you cannot do anything, send them your prayers. At least we can say something as we have organized ourselves here. I think it can go online. People will know that something is actually happening. Ghana is also concerned about what is happening there. We had Ghanaian students studying in Ukraine. We had Ghanaians studying in Russia who were also affected because they are not your blood relatives. You think they are not impacted. Somebody somewhere is also being negatively impacted by the war. So we shouldn't say how can we as Africans, help if you cannot do anything, at least say a prayer for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the impact of globalization, that's what she's trying to emphasize. So the last, we'll pick his intervention and then can you please pass the microphone to him?
Yeah, well, having said that, guys, my name is Joseph Kobla Wemako, and I'm the Executive Director of Human Rights Reporters Ghana. It's quite unfortunate that we have to be seated here discussing this whole thing because for me, as an activist, there is no justification of paying evil for evil. If at all somebody has done something and has done some wrongdoing, and another person is the cause of the other person, must you take somebody's eye because the person has also done something to hurt you in the past? There's no justification. Once it's a human right violation, we have to condemn it in no uncertain terms and see how best we can assist or support to ensure that rights are respected, protected, and people's rights are fulfilled. So absolutely, there's no justification to say. Now, let's just say that there's a fire on the mountain. What can we do to quench the fire? Because when we quench that fire, it's going to benefit all of us. So interesting perspectives being shared over here, and we are fully in support. We'll see how best we can also render our support, be a voice that will sound to ensure that we ensure that the peace that we are all searching for prevails. Thank you very much.
Just to say the questions, the one that refers specifically to the NATO part of the conversation, we'll pass it over to those who deal with politics. My interest is not politics. It has never been politics. The interest is about that child. All of us were once children. We had an experience where either we had porridge in the morning or we didn't have porridge. We had an experience where we all went to school. That's why we are all seated here. But we have a situation where children are removed from their country illegally and taken to a different country to be brainwashed. And you tell me we don't have something to say about this? Then it's a pity because, as I said, the interest is not politics. The interest is those children. Bring them back. It's as simple as that. And that is what we are here to draw awareness on. Our interest should be from the angle that we have experienced it. And by the way, Katharina, the reason why it works here is that we have a system of extended family, where if a child is removed, let's say from Burkina Faso and brought to Ghana, and Ghana is required to send the child back, if the parents are not available, they'll ask for the uncle, they'll ask for the auntie, they'll ask for the grandma. In your thought, you said you ask for foster parents. No, that's far for us. Extremely far. We look at the extended family, even within the African children's rights conversations, we recognize that aspect, that the extended family plays a very strong role in the upbringing of a child. And most of us here grew up either with our grandmothers or with our uncles and all whatnot. With the story, the question behind about the parable of, I'll call it parable if you don't mind me, of take out the log in your eye before you take out that of your neighbor. I'll tell you something about this continent with this type of sayings is that we have a counter saying always in all our things that we say, whether you believe it or not. One of them is that one hand cannot wash itself properly. The other one is that Nigerians will tell you that if you eat alone, go alone. So we honestly need to look at the conversation this way. It is true that take the log out of your eyes so that you can see the other person. And if you fly, they'll tell you put on the mask in terms of emergency before you help your neighbor. We agree on that. But this is not about that. It's about the fact that we are struggling to take out the log out of our eyes. And if we can't take the log out of our eyes, we try to find that person next to us to see how we can both help ourselves to take out this log. So if we don't take these things very seriously, I promise you, all of us, Ghana can say whatever it wants. You can stay very peacefully and eat all the nice rice, jollof rice that you want to consume. But when this fire spills on us, then we start feeling the pain of what is happening. Children do not sit on war tables. Children are not involved in NATO. Children are not involved or not supposed to carry arms. Whether NATO provoked Russia or not, or whether Russia provoked NATO or not, the reason why we are having a one-sided conversation is because when they blame you, when you are guilty, you are hardly seen in the court of law to bring the first charge against the other person. It is unheard of. It is the person who is affected who is always the first person to submit a plea to a court of law. We are here to speak about Ukraine because it is children from Ukraine that have been forcefully removed and not the other way around. If it happened to Russia, we'll probably be here speaking about Russia. But it happened to Ukraine, and I support Russia or Ukraine. If Russia or Ukraine took children out of Ukraine, I would support Russia. But the story is completely different. And it is Russia that has removed these children. My interest is again children. I'm not interested in the politics. Just bring them back home. Thank you.
So I would like to address my first words to the minister who told about disregard to Africa by the side of the international community. So I am from Ukraine. I am from the so-called Western world, but I am here. I am here because we would like to listen to you. We would like to know your experience. We would like to join our efforts with you in order to help children not only in Ukraine, but in order to help children in other countries, including states of Africa. We know that Russian soldiers and Russian participants of the so-called private companies, they abducted children from Cameroon, from the Central African Republic. We are also aware about the fate of Palestine children, and we are also very preoccupied because of this. We are not representatives of official government. We are representatives of non-government organizations. And we are fighting for not for some political, geopolitical interests. We are fighting for the best future for our children, for Ukrainian, African, Palestine. I would like to mention that today, Ukraine sent the first assistance, humanitarian aid to the Palestine, directly our grain to Palestine, to help to avoid the escalation, the aggravation of humanitarian crisis. So we are not somewhere, we are here. And I would like, because I remember it and I would like to cite it, that I am African not because I was born in Africa. I am African because Africa was born in me, inside me. So we are here because we are not disregarding you. We are here because we would like to be with you. And in the context of other questions about psychological support, rehabilitation after re-education and brainwashing, you can understand that it is very difficult to fight against all these negative consequences. Sometimes, and unfortunately, it is not related, for example, to the time during which these children were under Russian control. It is not in link with the age, sex of children. So it is very individually. We can't elaborate some unified system in order to help to all children. So we need the whole army of psychologists, of social managers, of case managers, in order to be sure that these children receive everything they need. In Ukraine, we have such non-government organizations who help, who assist these children, not only in rehabilitation, but also, for example, during the processes of investigation in Ukraine and also in the International Criminal Court. So we would like also to establish some national system, but you can understand that we need some time in order to do it. Unfortunately, we were not ready, as I have already mentioned, to the such a scale of atrocities and of crimes and of victims, children affected by Russian war. And also about extended families. So it is also the case for Ukrainian children, because according to statistics provided by UNICEF, before the large-scale invasion, children who were in institutions, in orphanages, Ukrainian children, they were not orphans, blood orphans. They were the so-called social orphans. So they have blood relatives. Grandmothers, grandfathers, and uncles who are ready to care about them. But also the question is that during these 2 years, Ukraine prepared to repatriation of Ukrainian children. We have more than 1,000 families and separate people who are ready to foster these children, who pass all trainings. So we are ready for repatriation, and the main obstacle is just the total absence of any desire by the side of the Russian Federation to cooperate and to return Ukrainian children. And here it is also about some possible peaceful agreement and other agreement with Russia. They are not ready even to conclude some legally binding agreement in very concrete sphere of repatriation of children, to have some concrete obligations already enshrined in international treaties signed by them. They are not ready to negotiate such a mechanism through legally binding agreements. How we can trust them and to sign peaceful agreement to stop the war? So this is a problem. When Russia receives some so-called invitation to the second round of the Global Peace Summit, after several weeks, they attack Okhmadit intentionally, Ukrainian Children's Hospital. This is their response for invitation to negotiate peace.
You want?
Thank you very much. I would like to respond to the first question of the gentleman. I would like to stress, to continue what Katya said, that we here do not represent official line of Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine is democracy, even during the times of war. I am well known in Ukraine for criticizing Zelensky for years. It's not Russia. We are democracy, so we have different points of views, right? But we operate with hard facts. You may believe in Russian stories about NATO provocations. Okay, fine, if you would like to believe it. But let's talk about hard facts. Again, did Ukraine want to join NATO before 2014? The answer is no. Was Ukraine neutral when Russia attacked Ukraine in 2014? Yes. Did Ukraine give up nuclear weapons? Yes, this is hard fact. Was we attacked by the guarantee of our security, Russia? Yes, these are hard facts. Okay, there could be different interpretations, why, when, but these are hard facts. Again, who started full-scale invasion in 2022? Are Ukrainians bombarding or invading Russia? Are Russian children dying or Ukrainian children are dying? So please think about that. Again, there could be different narratives, okay? But there are hard facts which nobody can ignore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there are any burning questions that anyone wants to ask. If not, I want to thank Katrina and Elvis for the very insightful presentation. I think the key point here is that it is not about politics. It's about the children who are affected by this war. And it is not about Ukraine or it is not about Russia, but it's about protecting the right of children who have been severely impacted by what is happening and ensuring that children also have the rights that are accorded them under international law. And I think that is where the core by our presenters is situated. And I think we all have obligation to heed to that call and ensure that the rights of children are protected, even in armed conflict. When you go around us, when you go to Liberia, you go to Sierra Leone, you go to even Burkina Faso, what is happening in Burkina Faso now, and you see how the war has impacted on children. I mean, no one will tell you that we need to add our voices to ensure that perpetrators of human rights violations, especially against children, are caught and the appropriate laws enforced to ensure that the rights of children are also upheld, even in times of war. So I want to thank you very much for your participation in this session, and also thank Katrina and Elvis once again for that excellent presentation. Thank you. So let's give them a round of applause. So we've gotten to the last session on the agenda, which is, if you look at your agenda, we have a discussion. But basically, what we want to do is that we don't want to have this very important conversations and meeting and just leave without at least having some recommendations to inform the interventions of African governments and also African states. And so whilst the discussions were ongoing, we had a team that has been able to draft a short communique or press release emanating from some of the discussions that we've held. And we wanted to be owned by all of us. And so we are projecting it. We want to quickly go through, look at the content. If there are any issues or if there are any language that you want it to be changed, we can all make those suggestions so that whatever we have here will be collectively owned by all of us at the end of this meeting. So within the next 10-15 minutes, we want to quickly run through, and then you can point out any issues that you want to be reviewed. So maybe I will read. Or that should be fine, right? I will read, and then if there are any comments, we can just take them. So let me start from the actual contents. Yes, so I'll read paragraph by paragraph. So we have, it reads, a group of Ghanaian, South African, and Ukrainian civil society organizations is calling on the African Union and delegates of African states to lead the way for safer nuclear energy development, better protection of children, and fewer opportunities for nuclear armed states to threaten disarmed nations through the reform of the United Nations Council. Are there any comments on this particular first paragraph? Any comment or suggestions? Okay, I'm not seeing. Okay, yes. They should highlight them. Okay. So those who are helping us to. So the suggestion is that just for emphasis, you can highlight those from African state to lead the way for safer. Is that it? Okay. Yeah, so they are taking notes, so they will do that. So I'll go to the second paragraph, which reads, experts from the various institutions collaboratively developed 3 policy briefs in support of the African Peace Mission and Ukraine Peace Formula. Those were the policy briefs that were presented. These briefs address UN reform, the safety of nuclear power stations, and the protection of children during armed conflicts. The recommendations were presented at the seminar, the African Peace Mission and Ukraine Peace Formula, Strategic Engagement on Regional Security, Nuclear Safety, and Human Rights, ahead of the African Union Mid-Year Coordination Meeting taking place on 19 to 20th July in Accra. Are there any comments on this paragraph? Any revisions? Any change of language? Yes. So I think we can move on. Yeah, please, can you go up? Oh, okay, so please add the year to 20th July 2024. Yeah, 2024. So the experts specifically call on the AU and African states to 1, initiate UN reform that reduces the power of the veto rights. This means empowering the United Nations General Assembly to overrule a veto with a two-third majority. Ukraine's experience showed that while the majority IT, yeah, IT, what is happening? Okay. So whilst they are doing that, perhaps you can be reading through. Yeah. So Ukraine's experience showed that while the majority of countries condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is over 141 states, Russia could block any UN action to defend Ukraine by using its veto at the UN Security Council. Changing the veto power distribution would help ensure global peace if any veto holding country starts military aggression against another state. Any comments? Any comments? Any changes recommended? Okay. So we move to the next paragraph. It says the mechanism for a provisional review and amendment of the UN Charter is also built in Article 109, which enables a special Charter Review Conference to be convened by a two-third majority of the UN General Assembly and a single vote from the 9-member Security Council. Any comments? Any revisions? Okay, we move on. Such a vote cannot be vetoed by the permanent members and would be relatively democratic, since Article 109 states that each member state of the United Nations shall have one vote. Can you scroll up? So point 2, that's the second recommendation. Act immediately to uphold international obligations on non-proliferation and stop aggression of nuclear armed states against the nuclearized nations. So in 1994, Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal, the third largest in the world at the time, in exchange for security assurances from the USA, UK, and Russia. Russian aggression against Ukraine endangers the core of international non-proliferation, increasing the risk of non-nuclear nations pursuing their own weapons of mass destruction. In 2023, global military spending increased by 7%, which means less funds for socioeconomic development around the world. Any comments? Any revisions? Should I move on? Okay. So the third point, protect peaceful nuclear power plants by approving new binding international legislation that prohibits military attack on nuclear facilities. So nuclear technology is a potential option to support African economic development. The occupation of the largest operational nuclear power plants in Europe by Russian military forces in violation of all nuclear safety principles must be stopped and never repeated. Ghana and many African countries recently voted for a UN resolution calling on Russia to remove its military forces from the Ukraine power station. Any comment here? So the last sentence, from the Ukrainian nuclear power station. So I have a little concern with the use of Ghana. Perhaps we can make it African countries, so it represents all African countries, because we don't have any government official here to yeah. So I'm looking at it from that perspective, that we should make it African countries instead of singling out only Ghana. Yes.
That in the UN resolution abstained from the votes.
Yeah.
So the use of African countries to make it representative might bring a challenge.
So that's why there's many. So majority of African countries.
Okay, yeah, then that's fine.
Yeah. So we can delete Ghana.
So we are using Ghana as a point, as a venue, and not as the state that is making a statement in this regard. So if we say several African countries recently voted against or for the UN resolution, I think we go for the several African countries or many. But that event was held in Ghana.
Yeah.
That is something else.
Yeah.
I think so.
I totally agree. Yeah. So you take out Ghana and you keep many African countries or several African countries. Are we okay? Okay. So we move on. Point 4. Recognize that children are the first victims of military conflicts. As of June 2024, Russia has unlawfully and forcefully deported 19,546 Ukrainian children. Post 2022, Russia has approved a new legislation allowing the change of citizenship, name, surname, and date of birth of Ukrainian children without parental consent. Ukrainian children have been sent to 57 regions of Russia, with some already adopted into Russian families. Despite support from UN institutions, the International Red Cross, religious leaders such as the Vatican, and individual states like Qatar, only 715 children have been returned in nearly 3 years. There is a lack of effective mechanism for their return. Any comment here? Any revisions? Yes.
Is it possible to let this particular paragraph has can we reference the data for some of these things, right, so that it gets more authority? So if we know that Russian legislation, we may quote it. Again, the statistics too, we may source where we are getting some of this information from to give it more authority.
Okay. Yes. So I think you've taken note of that. Yeah. Great. Any further points? Okay. So the last paragraph, Russian militarily invaded Ukraine in 2014, and with the lack of international response to its aggression, it escalated its military invasion to a full-scale war in 2022. The collaborative platform for experts have been initiated by the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, the Democratic Institute Foundation, and the Ukraine Association of South Africa. More than 20 experts from different fields are partnering for a better future for the African continent. Any comments, any reviews? So I have a comment, but let me listen to it.
Sorry, not to comment on the text itself, but just as I'm attending from a diplomatic mission, and I don't know if there are others in the room, I think just worth saying for the record that I am here in a listening capacity, and I think the text reflects the fact that this is a text from independent organisations, but I just think worth putting that on the record. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so I think you've taken notes, right? Yeah. So I have a general comment which has to do with the fact that I don't see the points that we have there. I don't see much on the African Peace Mission and what can be done to reinforce their mission last year and the future of that African Peace Mission. If we can have a point on that, I think that will also reflect the core of our discussion today. I don't know what people think. Is that a good suggestion? The African Peace Mission. I think Professor Tim made some very useful points. So if we could at least extract some of the things he said to look at how we can improve the African Peace Mission, or what the African government and leaders are also doing to help address the situation in relation to the Ukraine peace formula. Yeah, at least there should be something to reflect the African peace mission. Okay, so
Thank you. Because we are in a position where Africa, the head of states that went to have to rush to Ukraine, they made some recommendations, but those recommendations are still on paper, and there were quite some strong recommendations in those 10 bullet points, including the request for children to be returned to Ukraine. So could they, or the associations, independent as we are here, we call on the African Union through the state representatives that went to Ukraine to now start putting measures in place to implement its recommendations, right, during its peace mission to Ukraine.
Yeah, yeah. So to implement and also follow ups on some of the interventions, and also complementing the other interventions by other actors. I think that will also help a lot. Yeah. So good. If there are no further comments, I think the team will review it based on the comment that have been made, and then they will later finalize it and then publish it. So I think that yes. So we are going to formatting. So you have to look at the formatting, please. Okay, so let's look at the best way we can make it more presentable to those that we are targeting. Yeah, so I will leave that to the team to finalize the document. Is that okay? Okay. So I think that we have come to the end. We've come to the end of the meeting. We're supposed to close by 1:30. I think we are now 1:40. So I don't know if you have any announcements or any.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Festus, first of all, for excellent facilitation and also finishing us just 10 minutes after the set time. I think it's really a skill with taking into account that we went through quite heavy discussions, and thank you for your interest in the topics and all the questions. I just want to mention that we do have tomorrow another event at the University of Ghana. So if any of your friends or colleagues would be interested to participate, it's from 10 to 12:30. And you can ask me and I'll give you the details of the room, but please join us and let's continue working on this. I hope those who are interested in specific issues received the reports. If you don't want to carry with you a paper version, we can give you an electronic version of the document. But once again, thanks a lot to all our experts for their hard work on those three topics. And we are happy to see that reports are done. As people from experts and academia, you know that to have something done, it takes a lot of courage and strength. So thanks to our experts who worked hard on those issues, and we hope that we can continue this conversation in the future. And there is also a small souvenir that Prof and other delegates can distribute from Ukraine, a pen, so that you can use it in the future to write.
Thank you very much. So on behalf of the Executive Director of WANEP and also the management of WANEP, we will also want to thank you for the partnership and collaboration in having this meeting. We also want to thank our distinguished participants and those who made the contributions, who made the comments. I think our collective effort have made this half-day event very successful. But the point I want to make is that the road to peace in Ukraine may be long and challenging, but it requires our collective efforts. So as we live here, let's live here with a collective sense of, let's live here with a renewed sense of commitment and also a renewed sense of purpose to advocate and to also work towards having a peaceful world that we can all be proud of. So I want to thank you all very much for your participation, and I look forward to see you again in other events. Thank you very much. Yes, so we want to take we want to take a group photo here to have memories of our meeting today. So please let's all come here for just a group photo. Where are they having the lunch? The lunch. So where? Second floor. Yeah, first floor. Okay. Okay. So there's also lunch at the next floor. So okay, for delegates. Okay. Yeah. So let's please have the group photo, and then we can depart. So do you bring? Okay.
Stop, yes.